This past year or so has been unusual, hasn't it? We've become experts at Zoom and remote meetings. And it took a global pandemic for me to start using my sewing machine. I finally dug my Singer out of the basement, dusted it off, and found some needles, bobbins, and thread. And I tried my hand at sewing face masks. Well, my first attempts at mask making were not wearable, and they ended up in the recycling bin. But our family needed masks if we wanted to leave the house, and so I persisted. I tried again and again. The masks were wearable. I was doing something to protect and help my family. Well, somewhere in the process of making the same pattern over and over again, I discovered I was halfway decent at it. I relaxed and I enjoyed the process. And then I happily returned my sewing machine to a corner in the basement. But what I experienced was causality. Cause, making the same mask pattern over and over again. Effect, I became proficient in mask making. Causality. We see this in so many areas of our life. Study hard for a test. Effect, a decent grade. At least we hope so. Practice an instrument over and over again. Effect, beautiful music. Get up early and follow a training program. Effect, improved athletic performance. Have you ever thought of causality, though, in terms of prayer? Well, Blaise Pascal, the 17th century scientist and inventor, he's perhaps best remembered for his wager. Well, he philosophized that we each take a chance with our lives. We wager whether God exists or not. We should live, Pascal argued, as if God does exist. We're wagering less that way than living as if he did not exist. Well, when Pascal was asked why God established prayer, this is what he said, quote, "God instituted prayer to communicate to his creatures the dignity of causality," end quote. The dignity of causality. Well, this certainly applied to Daniel's life. Daniel from the book by the same name in Scripture. Now, throughout his life, Daniel was a prayer. We could argue that we don't know a lot about Daniel's life before his time in captivity in Babylon. But from what we know of Daniel's life in captivity, well, that tells us about his younger years in Jerusalem. I believe that he had a good character and a habit of prayer from a young age. Well, in captivity, Daniel and 3 of his friends were trained to be wise men in Babylon. Daniel's role as a newbie wise man, well, it was soon tested. No one could interpret the king's dream, and a death decree was issued. Daniel approached the king and asked for a chance to tell King Nebuchadnezzar his dream and its interpretation. The king agreed, and Daniel immediately prayed. He didn't try to run away or search the Babylonian library for answers. He prayed in response to a death decree, and God answered Daniel's prayer. Daniel prayed through other challenges too, consistently and daily. Prayer was habitual for him. Well, later in his life, Daniel faced another challenge. Jealous men wanted to trap him doing something wrong, but he didn't stop praying. Daniel didn't escape the lion's den, but he did escape the lion's hungry jaws. The noble Daniel experienced what Pascal defined as the dignity of causality. God answered his prayer just as Daniel asked, cause and effect. Now, we know that Daniel prayed, but what was he praying about? Well, he prayed for God to show him the king's dream, about the interpretation of other dreams, and to keep the lion's mouth shut. And Daniel also prayed for deliverance for himself and the others from their captivity in Babylon. I believe that. Daniel prayed and fasted for deliverance from captivity. He prayed, and yet he knew the answer. You see, Daniel was a contemporary of the prophet Jeremiah. Daniel knew about the 70-day or year prophecy that we can still read in the book of Jeremiah in Scripture. From Jeremiah, Daniel knew that it was prophesied that his people would be freed from captivity. And yet, he prayed. He still prayed as if his prayers would make a difference for his people. A casual observer would never know by Daniel's constant daily prayer habit that he already believed in the prophesied deliverance. This is another side of the causality of prayer. Like Pascal described, this causality adds dignity to our human experiences. We get to see God's answers to us in response to our prayers. And this encourages us that no matter the circumstances we find ourselves in captivity or a pandemic, with or without the promise of deliverance, our daily habit of prayer should not be abandoned. Daniel knew the answer to his prayers, and yet each day he knelt by his window, even when his jealous colleagues wanted to use his daily habit of prayer to destroy him. He saw his prayers out to the last syllable. Well, I've become proficient at making face masks, but just as I was starting to relax and actually wondered if, maybe sewing could be a new hobby, my singer seized up on me. The machine wouldn't sew, and I did everything I could think of to fix it. I downloaded the manual online and I read it. I watched YouTube videos. I refilled the bobbin spool. I rethreaded the bobbin and the top threads. I took out the little brush and I brushed out the lint and I blew into the machine crevices. Nothing. Well, then I stopped. I almost laughed at myself sitting at my kitchen table as I said this. Okay, Lord, I feel like a 5-year-old coming to you, but my sewing machine won't work. Please, Lord, will you make my machine work? I finished praying, I rethreaded the machine again, and I pressed the foot pedal, and it whirred to a start, and it sewed a perfect line of neat, tiny stitches. Well, I put my face in my hands and I nearly cried. I tried everything but praying. And when I prayed, God heard. Causality. You know, I talk to God all the time about the big and the small things in my life, and I'm ashamed to say that I felt like a 5-year-old asking him to fix my machine. I mean, why wouldn't he hear that prayer? He wants us to pray until we see the answer out to the last syllable, no matter how simple our request may seem. There's dignity in prayer. Through prayer, God lets us be a part of His plans.